So when you were working for the agency, what were some of like the most common cases you were working on with people, whether it be case officers or whether it be like recruited agents? What were some of the common like issues, psychological issues, or?
Well, in those first years when I was in that particular unit, it was mainly people of interest related to higher levels of government.
Right.
And then I moved to the sort of what people call the Q branch, or the Directorate of Science and Technology, and mainly worked in the Office of the Chief Scientist on our detecting deception program. And so most of my
detecting deception program.
Yeah. So most of my work in the last 5 years I was there was really looking at this question of how accurate are any of these methodologies that purport to be successful at detecting deception, and how do we know they work? And at the time, the more I investigated it with my team, and we set up different labs, and I was in charge of reviewing the protocols that the government would fund to say, show us if this technology works, right? And so my job was to go to the sites, because I've done a lot of human studies, and we'd be able to see, is the study valid? Does the tech work? And things like that. And the long and short of it is, most of what was being advertised doesn't really work that well at all. Whether it's a voice stress analyzer or a traditional version of the polygraph or brain scans, where everybody wants your tax dollars, right? They want the government to buy their products to go and use
contractors.
Yeah. So I don't know if you heard of the PCAS, that portable credibility assessment. It's supposed to be a handheld little polygraph. They cost a lot, and they never
like
worked.
an e-meter type thing.
It almost looks like
Scientology.
It almost looks like an e-meter.
Okay.
Yeah, it has a red light, a green light, and a yellow light, and it was supposed to sort of streamline this idea, but it's linked to the same idea as the polygraph, right? That lying makes you alarmed, and that by using any technology that sees an activation of your fear and alarm system, that must mean you're lying. And I'm like, well, I think the premise is flawed, because if you're in a war zone and you want to come and tell the U.S. something, and you know the other people will kill you for telling us something, you're going to be more nervous than the person who goes, I think I'll go tell them a story, see if they give me some money. Mm-hmm. So the lies in the intelligence world are more along the lines of lies of fabrication. Like, I know something you should know, so pay me and I'll tell you, which is different than the common lies that police run into, which is, I don't know, I wasn't there and I didn't do it, right? When they go, were you involved in a crime? They go, no. So we call that a lie of omission. And most of the studies that existed at the time, everything was centered around that law enforcement model of police interviewing somebody and saying, you did it. And
right.
No, I didn't do it. And the thinking around that.
It's like more of an offensive versus defensive lie.
Yeah. And it was like, the guy who created the polygraph, right? You think about that and think about Wonder Woman. He created Wonder Woman as well, right? So that's why her lasso, she could wrap it around people and make them tell the truth. That was the fantasy, or like truth serum. But the hypothesis was that lying is a threat. And so when you go to lie, it activates your sympathetic nervous system, because you're trying to survive the threat. And that if we detect activations of that part of your brain or your body, that's why it measures your blood pressure, your heart rate, your skin conductance, that those will tell us that you're lying. In fact, it's not
proxies, measuring proxies.
They're proxies for it, and it's not really that great. Mm-hmm. I mean, the meta-analyses in looking at the accuracy of the polygraph suggest maybe comes in around 52 to 56%. You could flip a coin. Under certain circumstances, there is a form of the polygraph testing called guilty knowledge testing, where you can get it up to about 70, 75%. But it's a recognition thing. So, for example, if I have you look at a card, I say, here we've got 7 playing cards or 7 numbers. You look at one, shuffle them up, and then I just hold it up, and you just say no. And I go, was it this number? Was it this number? Was it this number? You could say yes or no. When you see the number you saw before, you'll have a recognition waveform in your head. You get a P300, an orienting sort of response to it, and that'll change your skin conductance. And so, but you could say yes to them all too. So it's not really a lie test. It's a test of recognition.
Sure.
But that's not the test that people use when they're interviewing people in the field and saying, have you ever lied? Have you ever done this? Is today Tuesday? Are you sitting down? So part of my program was looking at those different kinds of polygraph testing, and then looking at new technology. Some people wanted us to fund brain imaging stuff to go to Afghanistan. I was like, who's going to put their head in a magnet and lay still? So, it's really true. If you have a compliant participant who goes, I promise not to hum, wiggle, do anything, and just think about what you tell me to think about, or push the little buttons when you tell me.
Right.
You can see some really nice differences in brain scanning between when someone is saying no, that they don't know something or don't recognize something, or endorsing a story that's a lie versus a story that's the truth. But a friend of mine did a study, Interrogation, up at Harvard, and he found that if you just think about wiggling your little finger, you don't when you're in the scanner, but just think about it. It made the differences go away. So
it made the differences go?
It made the differences in brain activity that were seen between when you were lying or truth-telling. You could obliterate those differences by just imagining you were wiggling your little finger.
Oh, wow.
So this dream that, we could take you, force you to put your head in an fMRI or something and say, tell us the truth. And you go, no. And it would, it was sort of a fantasy. Most people didn't understand that. And so my job, I got to be known as Dr. No.
Dr. No.
Because I would look at proposals and I would say, no.
How many proposals did you look at? How much? Was there a lot of spooky technology that they tried to test out?
People want the government's money, right?
Oh, yeah.
We looked at hundreds.
Allegedly.
Yes. Looked at tons of proposals. And most of the time we had to think about, look, our budget wasn't, unlimited.
And you're talking about budget, you're talking about CIA budget specifically?
Yeah.
Okay.
In science and tech, I had, with my boss, we had a particular budget that could be devoted to it. So we would say, how do we want to spend taxpayer money on saying what would be really useful, what would be relevant for that? So that was a lot of fun, because that part of my job was delightful. I got to meet lots of scientists, listen to their ideas, help them figure out will it work, won't it work, look at the results and say, looks interesting, probably won't help people in the real world for that. But there were a couple of technologies that turned out to work that were really useful. And we published on those since 2000. I think the first one was in 2006, 2007.
Yeah, I saw that you've published like over 100 peer-reviewed papers on this stuff.
Yeah, that's how I've spent my youth. I've designed all my studies on a bar napkin, while drinking and talking to colleagues.
Wow.
It's when you get most playful and you can design things. But no, I've been fortunate. I never thought I would be publishing on detecting deception, though, because my thing was stress, PTSD.
Right.
But when I was there, it turned out, I thought, well, this is how I can be the most useful, even if you can tell people what doesn't work.
Yes.
It's helpful, right?
Right.
Totally. I remember sitting in one meeting. I forgot where it was. We were over at the National Science Foundation. But I remember somebody presented on some data that was basically showing that their toy worked 33% of the time. And I remember looking at the guy next to me and like, flip a penny, you'll at least get to 50. and I remember I had two special agents sitting in the row who went, no, doc, but 33% is better than nothing.
Right.
And I'm like, no, it's not better than nothing. A penny is better than nothing. So people they really have a misconception about chance, human judgment.
I've heard statistics like about the old Stargate program that they used to do, the old Cold War remote viewing type stuff.
Yeah.
Where I think I could be wrong, but if I read it correctly, if I remember correctly, it was like less than 10% or something accuracy, but they still dumped millions of dollars into it.
Oh yeah.
I don't know if it's ever been proven.
No, but it's entirely compelling at a personal level, because you remember the times you got a hit. Right? It's like gambling.
Right.
You don't remember all the times you lost, but if you win once, you go, well, that paid off. That was really good. So we have a tendency to disregard when something didn't work, and we remember when it did. So if somebody uses, whether it's a voice stress analyzer or a polygraph or something, they go, well, I know it works because that one time we caught a guy. And I go, yeah, but you don't know how many times you missed like the 10 that got away. So to calculate accuracy, I have to know the true positive rate, how many hits we really got, and I need to know the true negative and the false negative rate of something. I need to know how many people I cleared that were truly innocent and that I wasn't just clearing people who got away with their lies.
Yeah.
So what happens in real life is practitioners, whether they're an investigator or something, they don't know who lied and fooled them and got away because they cleared them. They went, well, I believe him, so he's good, right?
Sure.
So all they're left with in their
Right.
mind are the people who finally confessed and looked like the confession matched what happened. And so it can reinforce this belief. And before it sounds too disparaging of those guys, we'll pick on doctors. Doctors do the same thing. That's just why now we have to do double-blind studies for medication, because every doctor could say, well, I gave that pill to my patient and they got better. Right?
Well,
And
yeah. And then same thing with surgeries too. Like lots of doctors, they do surgeries, and the surgeries that are, I'm sure there's a vast majority of them where they never hear from that patient ever again. So they don't know if it went right or if it went wrong, and if they found another surgeon.
Correct.
You know?
Right. So that's that selection bias of information that happens. And so from a personal level, you can come away intensely convinced something really works. It's just that we're not aware of all the times it didn't, which if we knew that, it would correct our view. But it's like I always tell people, you remember every time you hear the report of an airplane crash, but your watch doesn't beep every second a plane lands safely somewhere on the planet, right? Because it would drive you nuts. But you go, yeah, but that one time. Right?
Yep.
So that's how our brains are wired. We give disproportionate emphasis on something that is meaningful to us, and we place a different value on it. And that's true in the detecting deception stuff. I thought the funny part in that whole world is we as human beings, we always believe we're better at detecting deception than we are. And when someone's lying, they always believe that you can see more of their lie than you really can. So there's that illusion of transparency and that illusion of omniscience, right? And so you got two people being interviewed. The interviewer who's like, I think I can detect deception. And you got the guilty person going, I think they see more of my lie. And both are wrong. So, if you go to the CIA as a doctor, you're still practicing what you learned as a doctor, but you may be doing it in just very unusual environments for that. But lots of people had misconceptions about that when I was there. So I used to get a lot of hate mail.
What kind of misconceptions?
Oh, well, lots of people think that you are the spy, like you're the one who's supposed to be going and getting things or exploiting people. And I think that was around the same time when at the agency there was a big debate, because that's when the enhanced interrogation program was going on.
That was John Kiriakou, the thing he blew the whistle on.
And there was a real divide in our community of physicians, like saying, we think it's unethical, you can't be involved in it. Yeah. And there was another group who thought, no, they could. And now, more than 20 years later, we can see that, sort of when you torture people, it ruins our ability to prosecute them. So like the recent ruling in Guantanamo Bay, Judge McCall said you can't use confessions that have been elicited under torture.
Because people will, if you're torturing somebody's child in front of them, they'll say whatever you want them to say, right?
If you think about it, torture as a political tool might be very useful for a dictator, right? You can scare your opposition. You can you can make people frightened of you. You can probably get some information from people. But as an intelligence gathering technique, once people figure out you're not going to kill them, or that then you have no hand, really.
There was a CIA psychologist who lives like an hour from here, who was one of the guys of the architects of that whole program.
Yeah.
I think they made like tens of millions of dollars for that. I forget the guy's name. I want to say Mitchell.
Yeah, Jim Mitchell.
Yeah,
I knew him. Bruce Jesson and Jim Mitchell.
Yes.
And I knew them both. Yeah.
Yeah, that's that whole thing was crazy. The enhanced interrogation stuff, and what they did was, I believe they had black sites all over the place, right, where they were doing this stuff. Yeah. But my thing is like, I imagine torture's got to work to an extent, right? If you don't go too far, like there's got to be, like, how else are you going to get answers from people if they're going to hold back, and you gotta hold their feet to the fire to some degree to get.
That's the really interesting part, though. Historically, like from World War II and on, most seasoned interrogators have said, no, you don't. You create,
Really?
Yeah, that you work with people over time. They get to know them, and people begin to tell you things. I mean, the dilemma, I think, with it in the program as it ran is that people were never able to say, well, what did we learn from torturing anybody? I mean, I used to tell people, like Alan Dershowitz had once said, get a torture warrant, right? When people are arguing over, was this a good thing to do or a bad thing to do?
A torture warrant.
Yeah, just get a warrant to torture people. You might as well admit it, because
Right.
people were kind of going, oh, it's not torture. Well, everybody knows it was now. And he said, look, if that's what we're going to do, get it. And I used to tell my colleagues, I said, well, then show people the data. What did we learn from threatening to kill people, right? Or torturing people.
Right.
And then the public needs to think about that and say, what do you want your government doing? But in the world of intelligence gathering, whether it's Hans Schiff's work, and I'm blanking on the U.S. interrogator who worked in the South Pacific.
Who's Hans Schiff?
He was a German intelligence officer who used to interview POWs and get lots of intelligence from Americans. The other fellow, I'm blanking on his name, but it'll come back. But the work really suggests that when you create a rapport with people, you actually learn more from kind of a softer approach that over time. I think the fantasy that everybody has is that there's a ticking time bomb, that suddenly, like, you must know something that's going to kill a bunch of people in a matter of hours, so we need to do anything we can to get you to tell us, right now. But it doesn't turn out to be true. Most of that information is pretty perishable.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was a disappointing thing.
Well, I would imagine that with all the money that we and research that we put into stuff, like when it comes to war, that we would have had I imagine by now we have a much better way with technology and AI to extract information out of people's heads.
Or just getting
blunt force
info.
trauma.
I mean, remember, well, yeah. I mean, that's what I used to say, sort of trying to get intelligence out of somebody by like waterboarding. They were dragging them around wrapped in plastic with giant ice cubes until they die, which happened.
Right.
It was like, man, that's like banging on the radio with a sledgehammer saying the reception's got to come in better, right? And like in most of my work, me and Gary Hazlett were able to show just raising stress degrades cognitive function really fast and memory, so that you're changing the very organ that you're relying on to provide you the information that you think is going to be helpful. Right. So it never made sense to me. But I mean, if you think back, it was, for intelligence gathering, I mean, Hans Blix, when we were all arguing over, was the WMD in Iraq? And he's like, no, there's not. And then it turns out later, we know that Curveball was busy selling his story to a bunch of people going, this is what Saddam Hussein's doing. But there really wasn't. So I think it's true that if you're systematic with a lot of open source information, and maybe the AI approaches will even be better, you probably can get a pretty good picture of what's going on, rather than saying it's only one single source who knows it. There's probably some unique situations where, a single person might be the holder of knowledge nobody else has. But if that's the case, then they know you're not gonna kill them if you need it, right?
Right.
So it's like the stories you hear now about having to waterboard Khalid Sheikh Mohammed over 100 times, right? So it's it's sort of systematic drowning, and I think once he figured out they weren't going to kill him. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. What was the recent story that came out with him? What did they end up doing? They're not going to prosecute him. Is that right?
I don't know yet. I know that he and a few others put in a plea agreement, and then it was on the table. Then I think the Secretary of Defense invalidated it, but then a judge ruled that he couldn't invalidate it.
Oh my God.
So I think we're waiting to see where that's going to settle out. Yeah. But, it's like the fellow that gave him a TBI, the guy who was involved in the Cole bombing, he can't go to trial because he's incompetent.
Really?
Yeah. So I think that's the disadvantage of
Federal Appeals Court's thrown out the plea deal that would have allowed Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, the alleged mastermind of the 9/11 attacks, to plead guilty in exchange for his life sentence without possibility of parole.
And so they invalidate it. So then it'll go back to the table about whether or not they can have a trial. Like I had to testify down there, last year ago in May. Yeah, which is on all the stress research, and that's when the judge was trying to think about what happens under stress, and can you take a confession even if it was given while somebody wasn't torturing the person? And so the whole issue there was you take them back to the same room that they were tortured in.
Oh, wow.
So it was an interesting case to testify in because from a science standpoint, we know this makes sense. We call that contextual conditioning. We can do fear conditioning and make you afraid of this coffee cup, right? Or this stimulus that elicits a fear response. But we know that your brain not only learns that this is bad, that the coffee cup might be bad or dangerous, it also learns, oh, it's this room we're in. And so your brain is doing fear conditioning to the context and to the specific stimulus. And so the argument the government had been making at the time was, well, since we weren't torturing him at the time the guy confessed, it had to be a voluntary confession. And from a science standpoint, like, it makes no sense. If you've taken somebody back to kind of the similar environment they were in, and they still know these are all people from the government, and you've tortured them, it wouldn't be reasonable to think that they haven't got torture on their mind from a conditioning response level. So the judge said, no, can't use confessions that have been tamed under those contexts. So I'm assuming then that means it will all move back to pushing for a trial. Yeah. But it's amazing, right? This is like 2025.
It's insane.
And people were wrapped up in 2003. So, and we still have no trials.
And that's something that is definitely true, is that eyewitness testimony degrades quickly over time. Like the accuracy of eyewitness testimony, right? Like
really fast.
What they actually saw gets distorted very quickly.
Oh yeah.
And big time.
That was really fun. We did that in over 800 special operations guys.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I didn't think I was going to do that either, but because I had a friend, Beth Loftus, who's really famous for her work on false memory and looking at false memories that have been generated in therapy, where people then accuse their parents of abusing them, or aliens in the basement, or babies in blenders. There was that sort of recovered memory syndrome series of cases in the late 70s and in the early 80s.
Oh, yeah.
And I never paid any attention to it. I thought, okay. So they meet with a therapist, it creates a false memory, then they sue. But that's like for things that happened when you were 3, 4, 5. And it didn't seem to be too much of a stretch where I believe that we can manipulate your memory to change what you remember from when you were 5. Versus, can I change your memory for something happened yesterday when you had a big man throwing you against the wall and hitting you and making you stare him in the face, or if you were assaulted. So most of the time in like legal settings where someone has an accuser, people are kind of like, yeah, maybe your memory's faulty for what happened 20 years ago. But if a person just got sexually assaulted, we don't think that's happened. We don't think it's possible for that to happen. So if she says that's the guy, that must be the guy. And Beth Loftus had been involved in a couple of different cases where people were exonerated because the eyewitness testimony was not true. I testified at The Hague in 1997 because Steve Southwick and I had published a paper on war memories and found that memories about combat trauma change over time. And at the time, this was pretty heretical because when I was in school, we called it trauma memory was like a flashbulb. So it was called flashbulb memory, right? Like it's seared into your brain so you won't forget it, so you can survive the next time. So we had this belief that your memory for a highly stressful event must be better than your memory for what you had breakfast, 3 weeks ago.
Right.
And you go, unless it's the same thing every day, I don't know. Well, it turns out memory for traumatic events changes. So I remember I came home from that experience of testifying, and I said to my boss at the time, it was Dennis Charney, I said, I want to do a study looking at eyewitness memory at SEER School because the stress is good. We can get permission to take a picture of the interrogator right then and there before they started, beating the student, and then do an eyewitness lineup the next day. Right. And so that's what a couple of different papers are on. The first paper was with like 500 guys. And we found that memory for the high stress conditions, so they have different kinds of events, but there are 2 different kinds of interrogation. One's really physically stressful, and the other one, someone's just talking to you. they're threatening, but they don't lay hands on you. So we published that in the paper and showed that the memory for the high stress encounter, where you've had to stare the interrogator in the eyes, they're closer than I am to you,
right.
and they get punished for looking away. So they got to look at you under full lighting. It's not dark. The accuracy is about 33% for a live lineup. When we gave a photo spread array, we got it up to I think it was 42 or 43%.
Photos were better.
Yeah, just looking at still photos. And then we had pictures from the scene of the crime, so to speak. And in that first study, we got it just up to 51%. But the long and short of it is that in the other condition, where the stress was lower, people are at 75, 80, 90% accurate. So we had this paradoxical finding that memory was better for the lesser stressful event than the high stress event. And that was really a revelation at the time. So it took us all by surprise.
Wow.
But it was really helpful because it's sort of like if you think of a curve where as stress is going up or stress is going up and you're thinking of the accuracy of memory, as stress increases for a little while, your memory gets better. But finally, as stress gets more and more and more intense, it ends up being disruptive to our memory systems in the brain. And we think that's what's happening. So it's that inverted U. And so we think there might be a sweet spot, but those findings are really important because it said, look, these guys are some of our best for withstanding stress, and the majority of them are wrong about the person that they saw under high stress who was physically assaulting them. And then, and so from that study, we went on to do something in 800 folks where we thought, well, I wonder if we can change their memory like Beth Loftus has been doing in her experiments. So in one, for example, what I did after people had been interrogated. So let's say you were my interrogator. I've met you. I've been there for almost a half an hour, depends on the school. And then they put me back in my cell. Then, this guy named Dr. Morgan would come along and, ask them how they were doing. And I'd hand them a piece of paper. And I would just say, I'd hand them a piece of paper that had a photograph of one of my students on it from Yale. And I would just let them hold it. And I would say, so I have a couple of questions about your experience when you were being interrogated. And they go, yeah. And I said, what color was the room? Was there a telephone? Did they give you any food? Did they give you a blanket? Did they hurt you in any way? And they go, no. And I never pointed to the picture and said anything. Sometimes people go, I don't think this is my guy. And I would just look at them and go, wow, you are very tired. And I would just take it, leave. So the next day when we got them all out of the compound and we do this lineup, photo spread lineup, of the people we would do that to, 90% of them will pick the picture I showed them rather than their guy that they met.
No way.
So if you don't do it, 50% are wrong anyway. So if we don't do an intervention, half of them are wrong. Their confidence is 9 out of 10, though, that they're right. So you've got these super confident special operations guys going, that's the dude, right? And you're like, yeah, he wasn't even here. And they go, no, that's the guy. You're like, yeah, he wasn't even here, right?
Wow.
But if the guy that was on the photo that I showed them was there, 90% of them would pick that. And what we think's happening is that under stress, we have disrupted the consolidation of memory so that you can slip things in under that high state of adrenaline because they've been all jacked up from being interrogated. They're now in the room. Cortisol's still high. We know that cortisol's good for mobilizing, glucose, shutting down your immune system so you can survive and run or fight. Yeah. But it's terribly disruptive to an area of your brain like the hippocampus and stuff like that for integrating context and memory.
Yeah.
And so we think what happens is if you meet with them soon enough and you show them something, you're slipping in information and then they can't figure out where it came from later.
Right.
So it's like a backroom editor. And you go, yeah, that's the guy. And so the next day you don't know. It's a bit of a Trojan horse sort of effect. But yeah, we did a number of techniques that Beth Loftus had used in her studies and found they worked extraordinarily well under stress. And so that went a long way in the legal system as well. It's really helpful. It was really helpful in persuading many different courts to then permit eyewitness expert testimony to help a jury understand two key things. One is that confidence is not related to accuracy. Wish it was, but you can be super confident and wrong. You can be super confident and right.
Sure.
Or you can have no confidence and be right, and no confidence and be wrong.
Right.
So confidence
connection.
is not a proxy for accuracy. But boy, when you're sitting in the jury and you see good-looking guy who says, I can assure you that's the guy. They go, well, that must be the guy because you look confident. You know? And
so the jury.
We have to educate the jury about that.
Wow.
And then the other thing that juries don't get intuitively is a bit like we were talking about for deception. We all remember the time something bad happened to us, and we've never had an opportunity to check it for inconsistencies. So most people just think my memory for a high-stress event must be more true than my memory for a non-stressful event. But it's never been challenged like it is in the courtroom. And our data say, no, the majority of people, although they believe they're right, they're probably not, right? So the debate right now scientifically is what is reliable from it, like which element. And right now where we are is, at least in the stuff that I've been doing, we know eye color isn't shape of your face, length of hair, but whatever you can see from about 20 feet away seems to be pretty good. We're pretty good about race, body type, how kind of big or what kind of shape the guy was. But anything you could see from like 2 feet in was less than half the time were people correct. And we would joke on our research team, we'd say, well, it kind of makes sense, but if I have to wait, I go, looks like a really bad dude. Might be the guy who mugged me. But wait, he had brown eyes. What are your, and I have to wait till you get this color. I go, okay, it's him, right? Then it's too late. So we thought it's probably not adaptive.
Yeah.
So our memory didn't evolve to match what we need in court. Memory is supposed to be useful. It just has to be good enough. So you go, I'm going to avoid it. Looks like a bad thing. So I'm not sticking around. And you don't really lose much by avoiding something that didn't kill you, right? We were using a kind of interviewing called cognitive interviewing to look at deception, to see if we could tell the difference between true versus false autobiographical accounts. And in that technique, you say, hey, I'm really interested in your memory for what you say happened. Would you be willing to tell me about it? And people go, well, yeah, I want to tell you what happened to me. And so you bracket it. You say, so about how long was the experience we're going to talk about, and how did it begin? How did it end? Okay, focus on that time frame. Just tell me everything you remember. Don't leave anything out. Even if you think it's trivial or inconsistent, if it's in your brain, if it got in there, it's part of your memory, just go ahead and mention it. And then you shut up and you just let them talk. Then you go back and you say, I think I'm getting a really good picture. Humor me. Go back to the beginning, start where you did before, and this time tell me everything that's in your visual memory, everything that you remember like seeing with your eyes. And the next time you go, everything you heard, auditory memory, anything you remember feeling, touching, or tasting in the experience. And people go, oh, yeah, I do remember. There was this weird little noise going on in the other room. I remember wondering if it was a fan from the air conditioning system or something. So it triggers recall of these different things. And then if you say touch, they go, I do remember. It was kind of this rough edge on the side of the table. I just remember wondering why it wasn't sanded or something. They'll make these crazy little comments. And then you do the thing where you say, well, so now start with the last thing that's in your memory. Tell me what's right before that, and walk me backwards through your memory. What's in your memory right before that, right before that. And it jogs additional material for people. It's kind of like when you lose stuff, you try and retrace your steps in the day. Yeah. Or if you're sitting at dinner and you're talking and somebody loses track, and you go, wait, what was I talking about? And what does everybody do? They go, oh, well, we were talking about this. We were talking about this. And somebody you go, yes, now I know where I was. And you pick up your story. Right. That's because our memory works by association. Yes. So I think parts of our memory, it's not all in one spot per se. It's coded in different ways. There's different salience. So that was a memory retrieval technique interview. And the paradox in using it in detecting deception studies is that the technique fails to work in people who are selling you a lie, which is really fun, right? They've memorized a story to tell you, and they want to tell their story and stick to it. So there's no real expansion. You don't learn anything new by going through the memory jogging technique.
Oh, yes. That makes sense.
Yeah, because although it's not true that inconsistencies mean a person's lying, most liars believe that if they're inconsistent, you will know that they're lying.
Right.
So they try and adhere to their story. So we do something really geeky with that. If you take the transcript from the interview, you can create what's called a type token ratio, which is the ratio of new to reused words. So you can say 1 small step for man, 1 giant leap for mankind, just 10 words. But you've used 1 and 4 twice. So you have 8 unique words, 10 total. So 8 to 10 is the type token ratio. Here's the geeky part. Lying changes it. It lowers the unique word count, so it changes the ratio. And we think it's because
lying lowers the unique word count. Okay.
Yeah, it reduces lexical diversity, meaning you're telling your story and you're sticking to it, and there's more mental. We think it's a side effect of the increased mental workload that's required for telling a reasonably complicated lie, because you have to do a couple of things. If I'm just telling you the truth about what I remember, the work in my head is trying to remember stuff to tell you, because I'm being compliant. I'm going, I'll tell you everything.
Right.
If I'm lying, I have to remember what happened, so I don't mention it. I have to remember the story I'm telling you. I have to monitor that I don't let anything unnecessarily leak over.
Yeah.
And I have to pay attention to you to see if you're buying it, to see if I need because I'm trying to sell you something.
You're multitasking.
I'm multitasking in a different way. And that's one model in the world of detecting deception, where I found there's this crossover from my work in memory to then the stuff I was doing in detecting deception.
Do you think the idea of, or the concept of a photographic memory is a real thing?
In some people, yeah.
Really?
I do. But in other people, no. There's some people who tell you that they don't see pictures in their head. They remember the words about something. So I think for some people, they probably do think in imagery. So but it's probably easier for some people than others. So I think some of the ones are like some of those folks who can do that mind-bending thing of memorizing a deck of cards in 15 seconds.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, the idea of creating memory palaces is fascinating.
Yeah.
Because that works so well.
Yeah. I can't get it to work that fast. So I use it. I mean, think about it, right? You go, I'm creating this memory palace. And if I've got it, you're chunking all that data really, really fast in 15 seconds or 20 seconds or 30, whatever the fastest guy is. You know, like, that's amazing to me. But I mean, stage mentalists have been doing it for a long time for entertainment. As if you can make an image really fast and pair it with a number, you can say the number of the image, and it'll come back to your brain. But not everybody can do it.
The idea of a memory palace is like you go somewhere like a big building or something like this, right? And then you start from like the driveway, and you'll say, I'm going to associate this memory with the mailbox. Okay, the next memory is going to be with the front door. So you like memorize the front door, and like somehow you connect a word with the location in that building.
Or you just imagine it in your mind, that person or the object. So
right.
It may be quicker just to see it visually. And
so it's like a hot dog. You like picture like the Oscar Mayer mobile like floating there right by the front door.
Absolutely.
And it's just something about
or it's the giant hot dog laying in your bathtub.
Yes,
bouncing a baby on top of it or something. The more weird it is, or the more sexy or graphic it is.
Right. Oh yeah, that's another thing I forgot about.
It just goes quick, and it seems to enhance the recall.
The more provocative it is, for some reason it sticks to your memory.
Yeah, absolutely.
More. Yeah, something about visualizing this, like that 3D animated image in a certain spot. Like, it's fascinating how that works. So that would be like an example of a photographic memory, something like that.
Somebody using imagery.
Using that tool.
I mean, when you think about it, though, it's probably a sign of health that our memory isn't perfect, right? When you think about it, that's like in my field, like in psych, that's how like therapy may help. Right. So, if you always had to live and relive everything in its vividness and intensity, and it never morphed, it never diminished or changed, then we wouldn't see that reduction in emotional responding to it, because that's a memory too, right?
Yeah.
So the good news is that memory is imperfect, which means it's probably how we move on from stuff. It's probably how we tolerate family reunions. It's how you stay married a long time. You know, you don't go, I remember everything.
Yeah.
Kind of go.
Well, I have this theory about memory that is probably degraded over millennia, like with the development of technology and the written word and being able to like save stuff, save notes and read and have books and movies and documentaries and all this technology. I feel like taking over for mundane tasks is like, it's got to be like degrading our mental capacities.
Well, did you know, I've noticed it since I've had like, you know, a phone, about like an iPhone with contactless. I used to know all my friends' numbers by heart. They'd say, who it is, and I can name their number and remember.
Totally.
I can't do it now. Like
I just committed my wife's phone number to memory like a couple months ago.
Yeah. I wrote a book during the pandemic on Tarot, and I was drawing every day, and I thought, my friend Enriquez, he's a tarologist in New York, and so I was studying with him.
What? A tarologist.
Okay. Tarot cards.
Yes.
Right? So I redesigned a whole deck of 78 cards. I did all the art and everything, and that was about the same look that like my other neuroscience guys was like, "Hey, I redesigned a whole stack of tarot." I go, "Would you, And they're like, "Well," I said, They're fascinating. The oldest tarot in the world are actually at the Beinecke at Yale at the Rare Book Library, and now my cards are there too. They put them in the collection.
Wow!
But it's really funny. I've done these lectures, and people, if they experience a reading, they go, "Well, how does it know that about me?" Right? When they haven't told you anything. And it's kind of weird, isn't it?
Isn't this connected to astrology somehow?
It is in some people's minds. In my mind, I think of it related to the phenomenon that we call pareidolia. It's like where you look up in the sky and you see a man in the moon, or a face on Mars, or you see Jesus or Mary in a tree.
Oh,
or,
yeah.
Jesus in toast. Chimpanzees do it too.
There was a bank down the street a couple of years ago that the sprinklers stained the window. It was a glass bank, all glass, and the sprinkler stained it to look like Mary Magdalene.
Yeah.
And a church bought it.
I remember that.
Remember that?
Yeah, I remember that from this. In New Haven, we had the Jesus tree. Like, so Jesus in the tree. Protestants had a harder time than Catholics at seeing it. Like, I went and I'm like, got nothing. My friends who are Catholic are like, there he is. He's right there.
Wow.
I'm like, I don't see it yet. Right. But we do that. Or like cloud watching. And when you see shapes in the clouds, it makes sense. The areas associated with the identification of those areas are lighting up in your brain. So when you see a dog, it's the same area that lights up when you see a dog, right? And COVID gave me a lot of time to talk to people on the internet around the world. And I talked to this researcher in Japan who was really interested in the relationship between rhythmic, non-rhythmic music and religious experience, and also seeing things that may or may not be there. So he was showing his students these pictures of like snow, like you'd see on the TV screen, just that static black and white dots. And he would have them look at this. He'd say, just tell me how many images you see. And in those images, there's nothing. But the average person could see 5 or 6 different things in it. And he found that he could increase the number if when they looked at them, he was playing a rhythmic music versus having asynchronous beats made by this computer. So he's looking at how we construct meaning, and I thought it was fascinating because I'm like, this is really cool. Because when you're working in intelligence and you're looking at ambiguous material, right, you're trying to create something from it. So it doesn't mean this, and patterns, right? And our brains...
What is it called? What kind of rhythmic beat? What kind of?
He had synchronous and asynchronous, sort of meaning that...
Synchronous and asynchronous.
Yeah, so one's rhythmic and then the other's out of whack, where you're getting an odd rhythm. The rhythm isn't synchronized with the other beat. Okay. So you might call it modern or something. But it's either in sync or not. And that facilitated it to see more stuff. And I thought, well, this is really interesting. I wonder what's the best environment then for an analyst to look at vague information.
Yeah.
Because your job as an intelligence analyst, when you don't know what you're looking for, you're trying to figure out a pattern, is you want to be creative in like making patterns. And then you have to systematically try and knock them all down to see probably if any of them might be true, right? Because we do tend to see what's on our mind, like see what we believe. It's the old adage. We don't believe what we see. We end up seeing what we actually believe. But some people have a hard time seeing patterns in vague stimuli. So his work caught my attention. So I was like, this would be really cool. I wonder if people who because people vary in the trait of pareidolia, sort of seeing things in clouds and seeing things in mud or seeing shapes. And I don't know if they would be better at finding patterns in ambiguous information to help us discover something we haven't discovered, or whether the tendency to, would you see too many patterns, would you overshoot it? But I was just thinking of it that way. How would you select for who would be exceptionally good at finding hidden patterns in things?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really interesting, man.
Sorry, I took my Claritin D. I was just drying out. There we go.
Yeah, especially when you're like trying to analyze mundane data, right? Or intelligence, and trying to put it all together to like make a picture, because it does make sense. Like, you see what you believe. So people are going to, their conclusions are going to be affected by their bias or whatever it is.
And that's why you should line them all up and become, when we're training as Sapman runners at the CIA as well, you're trying to train people to come up with the alternative and then knock them all down, because it's really easy to find something that makes sense to us. It's easier than we think to like make a pattern and come up with it. Yeah, there it is.
Nice.
I love the washing machine one. Yeah, the man in the mountain. Yeah, it's pareidolia. And it's really interesting. People who are higher in emotional reactivity in the personality dimension will have more of this.
Really?
But also so do artists. There's a wonderful quote, I don't know if you find it, from Leonardo da Vinci about staring at mud. And that he was staring at mud and the cracks in mud. Pretty soon he could see figures and battles. And there's a famous quote from him. I'm like, oh, that's this. And he'd like to get inspiration. And that's what I was doing for relaxation. Excuse me, during COVID, I'd make my coffee in the morning, sit in the window, and I'd scribble all over a sheet of paper, and then just turn it around and around and around and see what popped out.
Really?
And would do drawings. And yeah, there it is.
Leonardo da Vinci once suggested that one should look into the stains of walls, ashes of a fire, clouds, or mud, and see. And these can provide marvelous ideas. Interesting. I do that sometimes in my shower. I have this like crazy tile pattern in the floor, and I'll stare at the tiles and I'll see faces in the tiles.
Yeah, that's this.
Yeah.
And you can play with it, because the more you do it, the better you get at it. And then it's really kind of wild. Yeah, this is the kind of stuff.
Oh, wow. That's bizarre.
Yeah.
So people who are better at this are more open.
They're on the psychological testing, they'll score higher in openness.
Higher in openness.
Because you're entertaining a new way. If you're super low, you'll look at this, and that's what it is. Nope, those are the lines, right?
Oh, there's the face of the moon up there, yeah.
Yeah. The face over here, that's on Mars.
Oh, that's Mars.
Yes, that's on Mars. But yeah, people who are higher in O, they will see more of those kind of figures. But that is the fun that's the fun work, the fun kind of drawing stuff that I love.
That's fascinating. I gotta take a leak real quick.
Sure.
Quick break. We'll be right back.
So that one you just clicked to is the first one.
So there's the first one.
So that was the original scribble. It might have even been the other way around, but I turned it around and around. And
full screen it, Steve. Full screen it.
And when I had that in that configuration, something caught my eye.
Okay. So there's the first one. That's just a scribble, random scribble. Just took your pencil on the paper and just
scribbling around. And I turned it around and around, and I saw that arc, and I went, that's kind of like an arm. So then in the next one, you'll see. Then I outlined it. I thought, well, if there's an arm, I guess there should be a head. So, and then it all evolved.
Oh, wow!
From there.
So she's pouring something into a cauldron.
Yeah. And see here, there's 3 streams of whatever is being poured, and one disappears eventually.
So now are you trying to make it into something, or are you still just...
At this point, I now see what I've got, and then I'm now just filling it in. Just tiny scribbles.
Wow.
So if he zoomed up, you'd see this is all just with an ink pen. And so those are all tiny dashes. So incredibly relaxing when you got nothing else to do during COVID. You can obsess on how to scribble stuff in. And at the end, so at this point, it's basically putting tiny little lines. And the reason why I drew all those other little lines is because then it gives me I can just fill it in. It gave me a sense of accomplishment.
That's incredible.
Filling in a row,
yeah.
right? So you can see the hash marks, and that's when it's almost done, and then one of the pictures is the complete thing. Probably
Amazing.
Probably the next one would be the completed drawing.
Wow.
But yeah,
Amazing
that's
stuff.
but the wacky part and fun part is that now, because I was just at the Psychic Entertainers convention.
Psychic Entertainers Convention?
Oh yeah. It's an awesome group. So, because I ever since probably late grade school, I started doing magic. In high school, I started performing, and in college, I'd been down to the Magic Castle and did stage shows. And
Really?
in the last probably 15 years, I mainly done things like performing mentalism, sort of mind reading sort of shows. And but then in COVID, when I started thinking about, oh, this would be really fun, let me try something. So I'd spent all this time designing these cards. And my partner called me and goes, hey, come on down here. I have something for you in the backyard. And I walk out in the backyard. There's this little tent set up. It goes, psychic readings. And I went, what's this? He goes, well, I have signed you up for the Sunday in the park across the street to fundraise for the park. So you're going to be reading cards. I'm like, and what? He goes, yeah, you've drawn them all. You should just read cards for people. And I was thinking, this is going to go very badly. I don't know what I do. So I decided, all right, that's what I'm going to do. Person would sit down and I'd say, have you ever had your cards read before? And they go, no. And I said, well, this is entirely for you inside your head. So while you mix the cards, just think of a question that's important to you that you don't know the answer to, but you'd like some insight about. And don't say it out loud. Just focus intensely on that. It has to mean something to you. And when you're done, I'll lay out the cards and I'll tell you what I see. And then you can tell me what makes sense to you. Mm-hmm. And so I do this. I think it was like 400 people later, people are going, how does it know that about me? I'm like, nah, it's just how it goes. Yeah. So I don't know which questions I answered. It was really meaningful. Sometimes people would hear and they go, oh God, this is like exactly what I need to hear. This really helps me see things. And I think what's happening so my magician friends are like, you didn't even ask the question. You don't know what the question is. I'm like, no. I actually found the experience is even more powerful when they never say their question out loud. They haven't written it down. It's in their head. And I said, I think this is what's happening. This frames a lens, right? This focuses your mind on something that's important to you. And then now I turn these around and read them like a narrative. And it makes meaning to you in your head that makes sense. Mm-hmm. I don't have to know what it is. And so it's been a really cool thing. I've done it like 400 or 500 people. I'm like, I'm going to do this formally and I'm going to do a paper on this. But because people really love it. And I'm always amazed. When I was in France last week, the guy who they had rented the house to have us all come, they were celebrating a big birthday party, had 15 or 20 of us in this chateau. I thought it was going to be like an Agatha Christie murder novel if nobody got along, but there's a billiard room and it was like phenomenal.
Wow.
I'm walking around and my friend Julian came up and he goes, so I've told everybody you're going to read their cards. I went, you what? He goes, yeah. No, I've already told them. They're all expecting a reading. I'm like, great. But I'm going to do it. And everybody was I said, but here's the rule. You can't tell me your question. Yeah, because otherwise you'll play around in your head thinking, oh, he knows me. This is this. And I said, I think the experience is best if I don't know anything, and walk them through it. So it's a really fun phenomenon, and I think because I've been thinking about it, about what I think's going on, and I think it's rooted in that Pareidolia phenomenon that's motivated now by what's on your mind that's important to you. So I think it's a way of looking at how we do things as a human, how we make meaning, and the meaning is real to people. But yeah, that was my COVID experience.
There was something else that you talked about with like DNA and storing information on DNA.
Yeah. Oh, that's wild.
Where did you get this idea? Where did this idea come from?
Well, there's a couple of different places. One is the first idea came when I'd read a paper on DNA computing. So if you have a problem that would take too long to solve at the speed of light, right? That has more than 10 to the 23rd possibilities. If you think about sort of billions of molecules in a glass and you've configured one to match some DNA thing to settle out, you can shake it all up and you can have a solution pop out. And I was like, I'd never thought about that before, that you've solved the problem of working on one computer and say I can have billions of them trying to solve a problem at the same time. So it's the same concept as for quantum computing. The only thing that's sexy about it is since you've got ones, zeros, and both simultaneously, then you can solve problems much faster that would take far too long for any other system to do it, which is why it's good for encryption. And I was reading that, and I was thinking, well, DNA is a code. And so when you put a code in, if you could synthesize the code, right, the only way you could read it, because there's too many molecules, you'd have to have the key to find it, right? And so I started looking, and there was a group who had they had published a paper on DNA encryption. I think it was out of China, but then one of the groups, I think in the US, I can't remember, they actually encoded a movie sequence in DNA and then had the bacteria replicate and were able to get the DNA from that, sort of the offspring of it, and then replay the sequence for the movie. And it's of what's his name? The horse running. I don't know, you might find that online, say DNA coding of film. But if you just think about DNA as an analog to the digital representation on your pad, right? If it's a code and the interpreter knows how to get the code and then you play it, there it is. And so they would encode that. They were using CRISPR. They're able to encode that information and code it as a strand of DNA between the 4 nucleotides that you can see.
Whoa.
And so if you put the right sequence in, it's going to help you recreate whatever that code's for. And so what they were able to demonstrate is, hey, we can take this little movie clip, turn it into a code strand, put it into the DNA of the bacteria. Then when the bacteria replicates, we can retrieve the code from its offspring, so to speak, and replay the information. And I thought this was great because it's not like the AI systems that have to be super cooled.
Right.
And a guy named George Church at Harvard had, I think in 1 gram of DNA, he said you can code 700,000 terabytes of information or something like that.
700,000
And I was like,
terabytes?
I don't know, it's a big number. But he said he has the most published book in the world because he's put it in DNA. And I was like, well, that's really cool, because if you can store information in DNA, which has been evolutionarily for at least a couple of billion years, you just think it's at room temp, And so the rate limiting step to make that practical, it was like now back to science fiction on Star Trek. Remember, they had the little tubes where they could play the music because it's coded in DNA strand. Just think of it as the new digital. If you can store everything in a little tiny tube that has all this DNA in it, you just need the machine that rapidly isolates the strand you want played. So you could play your music, you could see your family photos, right? Or you could retrieve anything. So from an intelligence standpoint, since you could use DNA, then what you need is a really efficient thing for me to take a picture, have it turn it into DNA, right? Or type a message, have it turned into a DNA strand. And who would know if that was on my body anywhere? Like, no one's going to find DNA is all over you. Or do you inject it into a couple of your squamous cells, like with the hypospray thing that they now use for melanoma, where you inject material into the squamous cells because they're going to slough off in 14 days. So do you get a secret message or plans or blueprints, turn them into a DNA code, inject them into your skin? No one's going to find those. And then when you get home, people can retrieve them by taking those cells, pulling out the secret blueprints. Right? So it's like saying, I have this new digital camera and I can send pictures over the internet rather than the old photograph system, right? DNA is just a way nature's been passing on information, right? And so you say, well, if we co-opt that, can I send you information that's not really about anything but like this? And how do I get that information rapidly turned into a DNA code? And then when I get the DNA to you, how do you rapidly turn it back? And so I found those studies really important, because I thought, in the age now where, people you can track, and it's so easy to identify who people are, this would still be a really difficult way of getting
track and identify where people are.
Yeah, with all the surveillance and monitoring where people go on the planet, and people tracking, what you do financially.
Right.
And I was like, well, if you're in that kind of a world, less and less and less is invisible. And so when you think about it from a national security or intelligence standpoint, you say, as everything becomes more collected and transmitted and shared, right?
Yeah.
Where are the arenas where you can have something completely unretrievable by other people if you want to keep something secret or securely get it to people? And so that's how I had a couple of things I was telling people about with DNA, that there's a potential way to go. Quantum computing is a different way to go to secure encryption. It just makes the number of solutions so hard for anybody to solve, right? But with a quantum computer, you can solve those problems faster. But right now, it'd be easy then to break codes that banks use or the military use, with quantum computing, because it can try out all the numbers faster. It's like trying out all the numbers on the keypad and going, there's too many numbers. This will take me more than a lifetime trying out every little combination. Quantum computing or DNA computing is simply a way of doing that faster, because you're trying out all the combinations nearly simultaneously, right? In the DNA computing, the quantum computing is just more rapidly trying out all the possibilities, right? It's not limited by 1 and 0. So,
you think this is something that is like seriously being looked at and implemented?
I don't know. I suspect that it is. There's a weird thing that happened in the literature. About 6 years ago, there was a drop-off in the Chinese publications on DNA encryption. So they've been publishing, and then suddenly it vanished. And all the publications were quite positive. So my assumption is
they figured it out and then went dark.
They figured something else, and then why should you tell anybody else, what you're doing with it would be one thing. And I never saw much published by the U.S., so I figured, if they were doing it, they just weren't sharing. But I suspect, because of the stuff like with CRISPR and people modifying genes, it's a very straightforward step. And because it's relatively stable, at room temperature, there's no super high sophisticated measure you have to take keeping something super cooled or anything, So I was just like, if they're not paying attention to it, then, that's what happens with a number of things. But I'd like to think we are. I don't know. Once I left, I didn't track that. But I did notice that less has been published from the group that was publishing in China on the time. So my suspicion was, they've been doing fine.